Hello and welcome to the BYU Library Family History webinar. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Olivia Tuller and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You're welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is on July 27th with Larry Jensen. He will be giving a presentation entitled Understanding German Historical Background. This particular webinar will be a pre-recorded lecture with no Q&A section. However, Larry Jensen's contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Richard Miller. He will be giving a presentation entitled 12 Ways to Advance Your Genealogy Research with the Goldie May Timeline Tool, the Subway Map. Before we begin, here's a little bit about Richard. Richard Miller is the developer of a genealogy app called Goldie May. He previously worked in technology roles at 3 genealogy companies, but only afterwards started doing his own family history research, which opened his eyes. He's building Goldie May to be the app he wants for his own research and hopes it will be useful to many others as well. And we will now turn the time over to Richard if he's ready.
Okay, thanks Olivia for getting us started. And hi everyone, hope everyone's doing great. Thank you so much for coming today to this webinar. This will be a live demonstration of the Goldie May timeline tool called the Subway Map. There's no handout. I'm going to go over 12 ways to improve your research with the Goldie May timeline tool. And part of the news here is that in the last few weeks, all of the Goldie May features, which in the past have been both free and paid, are now available for free inside of Family Search Centers. So that includes the BYU Library. So if you are near the BYU Library and can make it there for a visit, Goldie May, I understand, is installed on all the computers there. You could open it up and try out all the features and use it whenever you visit. So I'll go over the timeline tool today, and let me pull this up. Okay, so to get started with Goldie May, you would come to goldiemay.com and choose install on Chrome or Firefox, depending on which browser you're using. And then you would hit this button that says add to Chrome, and mine already says remove because I have it installed. But you would see add to Chrome here. And then soon you would see it appear in this top right corner under your jigsaw puzzle. This is where all of your extensions are. And so then if you'd like, you can pin the Goldie May extension into your menu bar for convenience. So with that, you would have the little black G at the corner. This is what you would find on any of the BYU library computers. And so I'll open up Goldie May. I'm already signed in. You sign in with your Family Search account. And with that, you are off to the races to use Goldie May features. Now, today we'll talk about the Subway Map. I'll give you the basics of the Subway Map, and then we'll talk about 12 applications that you can use the Subway Map for. At home, if you open up the Subway Map, it'll say down here, you can use this 5 times per month for free. So you use it for 5 ancestors all month long. And then on the first of the month, it will reset and you can choose 5 more ancestors. So down at the bottom, it would ask if you wanted, is the ancestor you're looking at one you want to use. But if you have a subscription or if you're at the library, then you just use Subway Map in an unlimited capacity. So that's what we'll talk about today. Okay, so to get started, let me pull up an ancestor. This is Josephine, and let me just show you some basics of the Subway Map with her. Okay, on the left side, the y-axis, you have the places where she lived, and then on the x-axis down at the bottom, you see all the years of her lifetime. Now, these white dots come from facts on the tree. They don't come directly from the sources. They come from indirectly from the sources by all of the vital facts, any residences that are on the tree, and then importantly, also the childbirth. So you can toggle on and off whether to include the births of her children on her timeline tool. James Tanner calls this the first rule of genealogy, which is that when the baby was born, the mother was present. So even though we don't typically put her childbirths into her, her vital facts, they are definitely events in her life. And so if you want to toggle those on, you'll see how those impact where she was living in her timeline. Okay, and here we're seeing a really smooth horizontal line through Copenhagen. So birth, confirmation, several children born, residences in Copenhagen, and then a really sharp vertical turn down to Utah. She emigrated to Utah, and there you see the birth of additional children, residences, and then her death in Utah. So this is a really clean subway map line showing, really strong horizontal lines and then one vertical line. This is maybe as clean as it can get. So let me show you now. With that set up, I'll start to give you some other options here. Okay, we're going state by state, or really, Copenhagen doesn't necessarily have states, but it's 2 levels of jurisdiction. So if I switch it to 3 levels of jurisdiction, so county by county, then you see a little bit different line, right? So we see born in Copenhagen, and then we have an unknown point, which is her confirmation, also in Copenhagen, but we don't know where in Copenhagen. So it says unknown. So it may be in the same place as that first Copenhagen, but we don't know. And then you can kind of follow the line through the various parts of Copenhagen. And then similarly down here in Utah, we show her in Salt Lake City for several points, and then Utah County in Provo for a residence. Then it says she resided back in Salt Lake County and then was buried in Provo. So you can see more of a zigzag there, depending on how many levels of jurisdiction you show in that subway map. So those are the basics of the subway map, to show you the places where someone lived. We're trying to get the story of the places, because sometimes it's too easy to forget where someone lived or not pay attention to where they were living. So we're trying to see that in one view. What are all the places that someone lived? So with that set up, I want to go now to the 12 applications for the subway map to your research. The first of those is to look for inconsistencies. Here's an example. I'll pull up an ancestor, Thomas Wilson Martin, and you'll notice that just because I pulled him up on the tree, it's going to just redraw the subway map for him. If, on the other hand, you'd chosen a Goldie May project in this menu, it would kind of stick to that project and the people in that project. But because I have no project listed there, then it just draws whatever person I'm currently pulling up. Okay, so look at this one. I'm going to go back to this state-by-state mode and turn off childbirths. This is a really clean line, right? So it says born in Virginia of British colonial America, and then living in South Carolina for all the points of his life. But if I turn on childbirths, wait a second, he's in South Carolina, and then all the children were born in North Carolina, and then he is living back in South Carolina, some of the children that in South Carolina too. So what's the story there? That's, this could happen. It could be that he and the family moved to North Carolina, and there happened to be several children born in North Carolina before they came back to South Carolina, but it's raising some red flags for me, and it's something I'd want to look into. So that's one purpose of the subway map, is to help you look for consistencies like that. Sometimes you'll see a type of inconsistency where you'll see the places listed as, say, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and then China. And you go, wait a second. And you go and look at the point, you hover over the point, and it says that it's a child born in North Carolina, but it's been standardized incorrectly to China or some other country or state. And so that's why the subway map will show it as a sharp zigzag off of the typical path, or the expected path. And so if you go into that residence and fix the standardization of that place, you'll get the smooth line that you expect if that person was living in that place. So there's no guarantee that someone was living in South Carolina consistently, but we're trying to find a consistent story, that they have a reason for having moved, a reason for having moved back, et cetera. And if we don't have support for them being in elsewhere, then maybe we need to say, hey, maybe they stayed. So that's number one. All right, number two is to look for children in the wrong family. This is maybe a variation on the first one, but look at this ancestor of mine. Again, with childbirths turned off, really sort of plain Jane line. But if I turn on childbirths, you'll see that he has a child born in England, and then in New York, and then in England, and then New York, and so on. You see the pattern. This is a problem, right? This is 1800s, so it's really unlikely that, unless there's a strong reason, he was a sailor or something, then he's probably not going back and forth across the Atlantic to have children. And so we'd want to look into this and say, hey, maybe these 3 children that are attached to the tree actually belong to a different family and aren't his children. Now, you could do this manually if you were to come down to the children and just click on each child one by one and look for a consistent place where they were all born. but the subway map trying to give you that fast view of any inconsistencies in the research. And in this case, my ancestor is Hugh Wilson, that is this child in New York. So it looks like my Hugh Wilson might have the wrong father in the tree. And so this is a reason I'd want to go look at that. So number 2, to help you look for children in the wrong families. Now, number 3, we're going to go to we're going to go look at your tree view, my tree view. Now, this is something you could do with the subway map. You could pull up your tree like this on the fan chart, and especially if you have a really full tree and you feel like, oh, there's nothing to do, it's all been done, someone else in the family did all my research and I don't know what to do. Well, you can hover over, you can click on one of these names in your tree, and that line will be drawn for them. And then you just sort of click on another person and just start to look for any inconsistencies. Again, you're looking for maybe a zigzag or places you don't expect. If one ancestor lived, mostly in the South, and then you see a line shooting off to California, then ask why. Why is that? So as you just click over into any of your ancestors on the tree, you get the opportunity to evaluate and look for new research opportunities that you may not have thought are there. And inevitably, I find, even as I look through my tree, it's common to find issues and to reveal issues that I can work on if I hover over the tree. There's one where there's a zigzag off to from New York just to United States, where the military service was in the United States and it's not listed as any particular state. So there's a zigzag. Go ahead and look at your fan chart sometime and hover over and look for any zigzags, which might reveal interesting research opportunities for you. All right, number 4 is Census Hints. Let me pull up Leonard J. Wilson, and let's open up let me set this up by saying that he was born in 1830 in Canada. And then in 1850, the next point we have for him is that he's in Illinois. Now, we don't know where he was for those 20 years. This means that this diagonal line is saying there's 20 years of ambiguity, and we don't know if he stayed in Canada longer or if he was in Illinois earlier. This is where you can turn on hints, and these gold dots will appear. These gold dots are collection hints that might show where he was. Now, here's an 1842 Upper Canada West census. If he stayed in Canada, then he might appear in this census as a 12-year-old. And so we could click on any of these links to open up a search for him in that collection. So I click the link on family search. This will pre-fill his name, his birthplace, his birth year. And now we're searching directly in that one collection. We're not searching all of family search today. We're just in that one collection. And ideally, if we're looking in the right place at the right time and he's there, we'll find him because it's a much smaller haystack to find our needle in. Likewise, you could open up the Canada Archives, which also has the 1842 Canada West census. Now, on the other hand, what if he came to Illinois sooner? If he was in Illinois sooner with his family, then we might find him in the 1840 census. Now, as a 10-year-old, he's not likely to be named. He would be probably a tally mark on his father's entry if he's in the 1840 census. I believe Illinois may be the same for the Illinois state census, but here are 3 opportunities to find the Wilson family in Illinois, particularly in this state, Illinois, and see if that narrows down where he was. Now, if I find him in a census, I'm going to use the source link here to attach it to the tree. And then if I come in here and choose reload data, this will redraw the map based on the new data I've added to the tree. And we'll either see the blue line, cut over to Canada and then go down, or maybe we would have it go down to Illinois and then over. But, maybe ideally, if we had all the facts for where our ancestors lived over time, we would see really clean horizontal lines and vertical lines, because we know, when they stayed somewhere and when they migrated somewhere, and we wouldn't see the ambiguous diagonal lines that we currently see. So that's number 4, the census hints. Number 5 is newspaper hints. Now, these happen usually at the county level. So if I switch to county by county mode, you'll see these new elongated hints, these kind of bars appear. These are referring to newspapers that ran in the county while he was living there. For example, here are 3 newspapers that ran in Polk County, Iowa, while he was there. You'll notice that it's extending back a little bit. So what we know is that he was in Polk County at age 65, 1895. But because of that ambiguous diagonal line there, it may be that he came to Polk County even earlier. So the hint extends back to kind of the earliest point that the newspaper ran that he might have been there. And then likewise, it extends forward to as late as he might have been there. And so any of those links you could click to run a search. Maybe we choose the Altoona Herald because it has the most pages. This is going to launch a search on storied.com. This is the new name for newspaperarchive.com. And so, we won't always find a match. This is one where we don't. But because we're searching for the person in the right place and time in a newspaper that ran at that time and place, the results are much higher. Goldie May includes several newspaper providers. Let me pull up one example of, Granderson is one ancestor I want to show you. This has some newspaper hints for Adams County, Iowa, just to give you a sense of the other newspaper providers. There's Storied and Genealogy Bank, and there's the Chronicling America, and then there's a Utah Digital Newspapers one too. So especially if your ancestor lived in a small county where the newspaper might have been the social media of the day, and they might be included for having dinner with a friend or whatever, it's fun to know that, hey, this particular provider has the newspaper for your area. You don't have to go looking on the newspaper site to know if they have that newspaper. Goldie May shows that to you and then gives you that convenience of launching the search for you. So that's number 5. Check out the newspaper hints on when you're in county by county mode. I'm going to pause here to take a look at the question. I missed how you can apply Goldie May to work on the family tree. Do I need to use it only at the Family Research Center? You can. So the question is, can you use it from home? Yes, you can use the subway map from home with a subscription or for free at a Goldie May center, or sorry, at a Family Search Center or the BYU Library. All right, number 6. Let's go on to locality research. You may have noticed that as I was hovering over some of these places, you'll get a little pop-up, and this will tell you these are resources for that particular place. So if we're looking in Cattaraugus, New York, we can click on Family Search Wiki, that link, to open up that exact article on the wiki. You don't have to go to the wiki and then separately type in the name of that county. It will open up that county article for you. And then you get all the convenience that you may already know from the wiki, which is, hey, when did birth records start being kept by the government there? 1880. What about marriage records? 1908. And you could read through the wiki article to see what resources might be available for that time and place. And likewise, you'll see that the Family Search Catalog is an option, or the Family History Guide. So you could look at either of those. The guide can be so helpful to look up specific land records or tax records or whatever that might have been applicable to that county. So you could dive into those. And similarly, the Family History Guide might give you ideas for what else you might look for in that county. At the state level, there are even more links. So the wiki, the catalog, Family History Guide, plus the catalog at Ancestry, MyHeritage, and then a few other options on Family Search that you might want to check out. At the country level, even more options. So if you're not familiar with Denmark research or whatever other country might come up in your research, hover over those place names to open up resources for that place. And that should help you focus in on, especially those diagonal lines where, we don't know where someone is. And if Goldie May hints aren't providing what you need, then maybe you need to be looking at locality research, in the counties surrounding the points. So that's where I would take that with the place research there. Okay, let's go on to number 6, which is event 6. Number 7, analyzing the generations. So let's go back to my Leonard J. Wilson. And this is, I have a pretty well documented paper trail to this, I think, 3rd great grandfather. But let's start to analyze him generation by generation. Down here, you can hover and you'll see options to add immediate family members to the graph as well. So I'm going to add his father, Hugh. And then his child, Bert, is my ancestor. So let's look at him. And then for Hugh, let's add William. Now, William is the problematic one I showed before, back and forth across the Atlantic, but let's pull him up anyway. And now for the sake of analyzing generations, I don't want to assume childbirths. When we assume childbirths, we're saying that when the baby was born, the mother was present and the father must be close, close nearby. But when we're analyzing generation by generation, we don't want to assume that childbirths are events in the parents' lives. We want to just take the other data points that we have for them on their own merit and see how they connect. So starting with I think this is my second great grandfather, Utah, really solid lines in Utah. And then as we come back here to Polk County, Iowa, he is also in Iowa at the same time as his father. So he wouldn't have to be in Iowa at the same time as his father, but there's some researchers' solace in knowing that we have records for them in the same place. And in the case that in this case, it might be an 1895 Iowa census, if I remember correctly. Now here, as we go back, here's a different county of Iowa where 3 generations are together. The father, the son, and the grandfather are all in Madison County, Iowa in 1885. Here's one, exception where the grandfather, who had previously lived in Canada, seems to have gone back to Canada. He remarried in his 70s or 80s and was back in Canada, but the family's sort of in Iowa still. And as we trace back, really solid evidence that the now father and grandfather are together in Iowa and then together in Illinois. But look, as we get to this 4th generation, the research really kind of falls apart there, because we have a point where the grandfather is in Canada, born in Canada, and we have his father born in New York, but we don't really have any connection between New York and Canada. And then likewise, that really problematic person I showed you before is doesn't have a great connection either. He's kind of overlapping in Canada, but then he's back in England too. So this kind of region of the graph is showing you there's not a lot of overlap there between the generations. So that's where I would start my research if I were working on this line. Is this looks all solid, but then as we get to blue, green, yellow, that's where I would start to look at what can I do to shore that up and say, hey, what proves or shows that William was in New York at the right time or Canada at the right time, et cetera. And that could be for any line, right? So I happen to do the paternal line, but you could start with Leonard and go back to his mother and then go back to her mother, which we don't have. And you could go back mother by mother, or any combination you want to trace back a line and see how well the research lines up. So that's the generation analysis on the subway map. All right, so let's go now to number 8, which is that we want to compare someone on Family Search to Ancestry. I didn't mention at the start that the subway map works with both Family Search and Ancestry. More trees to come, I expect. And so here is our blue line for Leonard J. Wilson. I'm going to go over now to Leonard J. Wilson on Ancestry as well, and and we'll compare the 2 lines. So we're looking at 2 versions of Leonard J. Wilson, one, blue from Family Search, green from Ancestry. And just for convenience, let's just look at it state by state. Now, with 2 trees pulled up, we can see differences. Here's a birth. It's standardized as Sharon, Upper Canada. It's really the same place as this one, Sharon, Canada, just standardized a little differently. Maybe that's one we do or don't want to bother with, or to standardize one to one way. But as we get down here, it gets a little more interesting, which is Family Search has an 1850 residence in Illinois, which the Ancestry tree does not have. Later, they have the same marriage date, 1855. A little bit different dates on these children and really different names. So that's interesting. And then you can go point by point and say, okay, where do they agree? Where do they disagree? And of course, we wouldn't take one or the other as truth without looking into it, but it gives us opportunities to research and say, hey, why, if we have this 1897 residence in Illinois on the Family Search tree, maybe I ought to put it on Ancestry, or vice versa. What does the Ancestry tree have, this green dot, 1863 in Iowa, that the Family Search tree doesn't have? And if that Ancestry tree has a great source explaining why they were residing in Adair County in 1863, then that might be something I want to add to the Family Search tree as well. Now, to take this a step further, let me switch over to a different ancestor of my wife's. Someone asked on chat, is the Goldie May subway map available at Family Search affiliate libraries too? My understanding is no, that affiliate libraries don't have the same access as Family Search centers. All right, so we've pulled up this ancestor of my wife, and let me pull up now the version of her on Ancestry. And just so it doesn't get too messy, let's just switch to state by state mode so we can compare. Now, similar thing here, we could go point by point and say, hey, why is this birth of a child, James Davis, way back in Kentucky, when Ancestry shows the family kind of moving on to Indiana, to Illinois, to Iowa. So that's one thing we could look at. But what I want to point out here is that because unlike the family search tree that has one global tree for all of us to share, Ancestry has multiple trees per user, and you can have as many trees as you want, and everyone has their own. And so if Ancestry users choose to share their member tree with you, then you could come in here under hints and pull up America Jane Overland from other trees. And so what I'll do is just click and open this in a new tab. I'm just right clicking, open in a new tab, open in a new tab. And then as I switch over to these tabs one by one, it will draw the line for each of those people. And now let's pull this out wide so it doesn't look too confusing. Okay, it gets a little messy, right? But we're looking at what, 6 versions of America Jane Overland, blue being family search, and then there are 5 versions from Ancestry trees. And again, the opportunity is the same for you to go through and say, hey, where do I see consensus and where do I see differences? And if I see differences, those are maybe opportunities to pull data in from the tree into my tree that someone else found, and can be great ways to surface new facts. I think to me, it would just be very difficult or tedious maybe to just go through one by one. And I don't feel like I'm very good at remembering or noticing that some fact that's different on someone else's tree than my own. So for me, the visual way works, where I can just see at an instance, hey, this, there's some dot here that someone has that I don't have. And so I'm going to go look at that and see if that's a fact that I want to add to my tree as well. So that's multiple Ancestry trees on the subway map. Okay, number 9, we're going to look at a merge page. This is 2 profiles for William Dalton, and I'm going to just refresh my map over here. This is 2 profiles for a William Dalton, and we are considering whether to merge these 2 profiles together if they're the same person. Here, if you have the subway map pulled up at the time you're evaluating a merge, it will draw a red and green line corresponding with the red and green person. And here you can see that they both show being born in the same time and place. The red line has a residence in Hampton, Massachusetts, or a couple of them really, that the green line doesn't have. And then they both kind of show moving over to Monroe, New York at roughly the same time. The green line extends on in Monroe, New York, but so it goes longer, it has more data than the red line, but I don't see any inconsistencies. So even sort of before I've gone down and looked date by date and name by name, which I would still do, the subway map is helping me evaluate that these the data looks really good to do a merge on these 2. The places line up really well, and as we look on the left side, the names line up really well too. You could, of course, pull in any relationships too. If you could come down here and say, I want to see the father and mother of this William, or in this case, the spouse of the other William. You could pull those in and see if that has any bearing on your research. But I think even at the first glance, it looks really consistent that they were in the right place. Here's is this the father of the bride, I believe, or the excuse me, let's see, Blue, Ray, Mary. So yeah, I think she's living in Monroe County, New York. He comes there later. So that's, I think, the story there. So, okay, so that's how you can use it on a merge page. Comment is all the similarities on Ancestry for the same person could be that they copy the info from each other's trees. That is true. So we would not want to think of all the Ancestry trees as a consensus model where we're going to pick the point that is the most consistent across all of the trees, because they may have just been copied. Use it as an opportunity instead to look for new facts and go back and look at the original sources for what they have. And then I'm seeing a raised hand from Lisa. Lisa, feel free to type your question in the chat box, or we can you can verbalize your question at our Q&A period at the end here. All right, what are we on? Number 10. We're going to look at how the subway map can help you with the source linker. Now, this is kind of like a merge, right? But it's not. It's the source linker you may be familiar with. We're looking at a record on the left and a profile on the right. So we're trying to decide whether this United States 1950 census on the left really belongs to the family search tree profile on the right. And if we open the details tab, you'll see the subway map draw these red dots. The red dots refer to facts that are in the new record that have not yet been added to the tree. So if we add this census record to the tree, these red dots will become white and they'll be part of the tree. But these are kind of the ones that are being considered at the moment. So here's what we see. We see that the new census record, 1950, says born in New York. The tree has her already born in Jefferson County, New York. So even though the line diverges there, it's still, I don't see any problem there. We're kind of looking at an unknown place in New York versus Jefferson County, New York. Lots of agreement there. And then the line goes on to her living in Oswego County. And as we get to 1950, the 1950 census puts her in Oswego County, New York, right in between a 1940 census and later her death in Oswego County. So really great consistency in the places. So just based on those two red dots coming into the line for that tree profile, this looks like a great record to attach. So then we could go through and attach that record on the source linker. And then if we were to attach it and then do reload data, we would see that line drawn with white dots because it's now a permanent part of the tree. So that's how you can use the subway map on the source linker. All right, number 10, we're going to look at boundary changes. This is a new feature in the subway map this year at Roots Tech. So let's pull up my ancestor, Hannah Collins. And we're in county by county mode. Okay, born in North Carolina, age 13, she's living in Gilmer County, Georgia. And then at age 18, we have her in Pickens County, Georgia. So at first glance, we might think she moved. I mean, she's in Gilmer and then she's in Pickens, right? But if we go down here and turn on boundary changes, this brings in data from the Atlas of Historical County Boundaries. This is a database often used by genealogists to examine which counties were formed from others and sort of evaluate what counties could even exist at the time someone was living there. And you'll see these drop in as vertical lines. So if you hover over a vertical line, you'll see that Gilmer lost to the creation of Pickens County. And as you hover over each of these lines, you'll see kind of all the things that happened to Gilmer County over time. And so let's come, if you turn this on your family, you probably want to come into any gray lines that are overlapping, you kind of crossing over a diagonal line. And in this case, this says that Pickens County was created from Cherokee and Gilmer County right in that time where we thought she moved. So it may be that she did not move at all. Her house may have stayed right in the same place, but she was living in Gilmer County and then Pickens County was created from it. And so she happened to be in a new county despite not moving. So that's how you would use that to look at the boundary changes. If you see a crossover, that's one way. The other kind of interesting thing you'd want to check is whether you have any data points for the county before the county was created. So if I don't have a good example of this, but if we showed her living we had a point kind of right here where she's living in Pickens County before Pickens County was created, then that's of course a problem or an opportunity. We want to go and say, all right, why do we think she lived in a county that didn't exist at the time? Are we kind of backdating the name of that county to what we call it today, but that's not really what it was called then. The reason that matters is because we're going to find records for someone in counties that existed at the time. And so we want to know accurately what jurisdiction someone lived in at the time, not just what they're called now. And so that's why we'd want to just examine the boundaries and make sure they're living in the right counties at the right time. Now, this also works for state by state mode. So if you go that way, you'll see, this is a boundary change between Arkansas and the Republic of Texas. Here is the creation of Washington State or Washington Territory from Oregon Territory. then as you go through, you see eventually, I think we'll see the creation of Washington State from Washington Territory. So state by state mode as well. We'd want to know that if we see a point before someone was living in a state or a territory, we want to have good reason for that. And if not, then we're going to go look for answers there. Okay, and this brings us to number 12, which is fan club research. I've shown you how you can evaluate immediate family members by just hovering on that little icon. You can add a father, mother, spouse, child, etc. By the way, that does not work on Ancestry. So if we pull up an Ancestry person like Leonard James Wilson, this is not an option to me as a developer right now through Ancestry. So you have to just pull up the page you want on Ancestry to draw that person. And so in the case of, if you wanted to look at generations for a family in Ancestry, you would just come in here to parents and click hue, give it a second to draw, and then you would get that new line, and then click on the next parent, give it a second to draw, and then you'd start to have, multiple generations of the family. So that's how you would do that. But okay, so what if, on the other hand, we don't have, we're not talking about immediate family members, even on Family Search. I'm going to pull up Charles Peter Johnson, who is an ancestor of my wife. And here we're trying to find out who his parents are with some accuracy. There's some parents on the tree, but we have reason to believe that Lars wasn't his father. It seemed that Cecilia was his mother. And so one approach to this is to do fan club research. And you may have heard of this before as the acronym FAN, meaning friends, associates, and neighbors, or some people say family, friends, associates, and neighbors. This is that if we can't find our Charles Peter Johnson in the records, because maybe his name is too common, and so we find too many Charles Peters, or maybe because his name happened to be indexed wrong on a certain record, so we're just not finding it. The alternative is to look up other family members and see if we can find them near him and kind of narrow down where he was. So you may have seen that Family Search has this cool new feature called Other Relationships. And here you could come in here and say that I want to document that there was some other relationship for this person other than an immediate family member. So this could be that apprenticeship, employment, enslavement, a lineage gap. So maybe you don't know the father, you don't know the grandfather, but you're going to put in a great grandfather or something. There's a gap in the lineage. You could document it that way. I've added someone here called Hans Christian Kofod, and I marked neighbor because that seemed like the best option at the time. But really, he was more than a neighbor. They were both from the same town in Denmark, Bornholm, Denmark, and or that's a region. And then they emigrated to Utah on the same ship. There's a great record from the BYU ships record collection that's in here. They were on the same ship in 1868. They're 1 year apart, and they seem to be a half brother. There's in one of the memories that says that he traveled to America with his half brother Hans Kofod. So they have several reasons to be either kin or friends, and they emigrated together. They just have a lot in common. So I'm definitely interested in Hans if I'm interested in Charles. And so I can't, of course, add a half brother from here and say if we choose he wasn't, if we decide or discovered he wasn't a half brother anyway, then how would I add him to the subway map? Well, what you do is you come in here to projects and you create a new project. And I'm going to click on here and say we're researching the parents of Charles Peter Johnson. And then we're going to take the ID for him and copy this over as a research subject. And now we're also going to come over here and grab the ID for Hans and add him in the project as well. Maybe someday in the future, by the way, I'll be able to access this part of Family Search where I could just pick up other relationships, which would be cool. But in the meantime, this is what you'll do. You'll create a new project for the two people. And then as you go into the subway map for the project, you'll see the two lines at the same time. And let me just go to state mode just so we're not bouncing all over the place. But my person, Charles, is in blue. The other guy, Hans, is in green. I am very interested in the green line because maybe that's where my guy was. So if he, this says that he was living, Hans, in Bornholm until 1862. I think that's actually right because of what we know about the immigration. But I could put in here that that I'm confident that I could put in a range that I knew he was still in Denmark because of Hans was there and they immigrated in 1867. And then likewise coming down. Well, what else do we see? There is a place where we're showing Charles in Nebraska. That may have just been a fast stopover on the migration. I would just follow this point by point and say, is there anything that I don't recognize on the green line that might inform where my guy was in the blue line? And that's how you would use this for fan club research. So those are the 12 ways to boost your genealogy research with the Goldie May timeline tool, the subway map. I'd be happy to take any questions you have. Check our time here. If anybody has any particular family search IDs you want to paste into the chat, maybe we can take a look at a couple of these and see what we learn. As usual, or as always, there are videos on the Goldie May YouTube channel about this. So at the bottom of each Goldie May page, you'll find a link to relevant videos for that particular feature. So in this case, there's a playlist of 27, and I need to add 3 more videos. These are all about 1 minute long, showing all the different features of the subway map. And then if you come back to the Goldie May YouTube channel, you can of course see all the features there. Subscribe so you don't miss any videos. And that's where you can learn more about Goldie May. If you have any questions for me, my email address is at the bottom of every page, richard@goldiemay.com. I'd love to hear from you, get your comments, your feedback, whatever that may be. Does anyone have any questions? I've got one. How did Goldie May get its name? Great question. Goldie is my great grandmother's name. And I knew her briefly, or not briefly, but I knew her until I was 21. So she was the great grandparent that lived the longest in my family, or for me. And so we named Goldie, and then May comes from my wife's side of the family. We combine that to make Goldie May. It seemed like all the leaf and tree names were taken. Thank you for your comments, everyone, and appreciate that. Hi, Michelle in Texas. Good to see you here. All right, if anybody has any other IDs from Family Search, we could take a look at any of those. And if not, you could try it out at your local Family Search Center or at the BYU Library.
Then someone asks, how do you change newspaper providers in the newspaper hints?
Oh, great question. It's just automatic. So you don't need to change anything. If you go to just a family member that happens to have a relevant newspaper at that time and place, then it will show it. So here's an example of my grandmother and hints. And let me show you Utah. So here's one that's the yellow one is Utah Digital Newspapers. It's it's just Utah, but it's really strong if you have family in Utah. So if I click on but also there's the red storied one. Don't see any Genealogy Bank there, but you'll just see those appear. That LOC one is Library of Congress Chronicling America. You'll see that one appear. And there's the green Genealogy Bank one. So you'll see those appear. It's fun because if you happen to have someone living in a small town, like my grandmother living in Bingham, when I click this, it launches a search and the first match is her, the announcement of her engagement to be married. So it's fun to see those when they pop up. So yeah, you just have to try it. You don't have to turn anything on or off of the newspapers. You just see what appears and then click the link to launch it and see if you get a good match in your newspapers.
Right. So Lisa McCole says, can you explain the different graph colors? How do you know which is which, like from Family Search or Ancestry?
Yeah, good question. So I am showing the lines at the top as they're just in order. So I just sort of chose blue, green, whatever it is, to be sort of pleasant colors, but they don't otherwise mean anything. But I still need to do this. I need to put blue down here next to Carlene so you can know that this is Carlene, and when you toggle it on and off, and it's up here, but I need to put it down here to make that more clear. But yeah, the colors are otherwise just arbitrary, except for on the merge page, which is where they're red and green to match the red and green, but otherwise they're kind of random colors. Okay, someone asked, Cheryl Brown, do you want to put in Henry Pfeiffer and then ID? Somebody with the same name and different spellings, who's born in Germany and moved to Minnesota. Cool, let's look at this one. Oh, did it come up with, I think I pasted the wrong one as I copied. Let me try that one more time. Okay, there we are, Henry Pfeiffer. All right, really clean lines, right? It's sort of a consistent downward, not any zigzags back. here's a zigzag back if I'm at the state mode. So here's marriage in Minnesota, and then a birth of a child in Kansas, and then all the children born in mostly Murray County, Minnesota. So I guess at the first glance, I would say, all right, where did Myrtle come from? Is this supposed to be Minnesota? Is this child Myrtle really born in Minnesota, or do we have a reason to believe that it was Nebraska? Here it looks like this is, maybe that difference is that this is a child that's under a different spouse. And so maybe, like you're saying, you said same name, different spellings. Maybe it's possible that someone accidentally merged Mary Jane and her daughter into this Henry. Let's actually look at the two wives here and see if that tells anything. So spouse and spouse. Okay, so one spouse in England, and then in Minnesota, Kansas. And then the other one in the other spouse in Iowa coming into Minnesota. Yeah, I guess I'm just really curious about that child. Let me take off childbirth so we don't assume anything on that. But yeah, that child, Michelle or Myrtle, it seems questionable, or I guess it raises a question. We need to go look and see, was she really born in Kansas? And maybe one of these two sources has the birth record in Kansas. And if not, then how did she get there? What's going on there? So that's what I would look at. It looks like, okay, I'm living in Murray and says born in Kansas. So maybe that's okay. Maybe it's a half sibling that was living in Kansas with the mother, and then they moved to Minnesota. But that's kind of a research opportunity I'd be curious to look at. All right, let me pull up one, Olivia, from A. White that's got Hannah Glover. Okay, we've only got one dot for her christening, so maybe there's not a lot we can do on that one. Do we have any parents? We do, so we could add on father and mother. Let's go to this county mode, see if that shows anything. So all in Cheshire, England, and we have a kind of offshoot to Staffordshire, England for the burial, but then residence, am I seeing that right? Same, yeah, back in Cheshire. By the way, if you're like me and you don't know where the counties of England are, or anywhere you're researching, come down here to map the places. This will take whatever places are shown on that y-axis and then map them on a Google Maps. Then you can see if, does it make sense for those two places? Are they close? Are they far? These are 40 miles apart in 17 or 1800. That seems far for 1800. So I would wonder if that burial is right, or I'd want to go look at that. I guess I would kind of take it as a given that staying in the same place would be the default. Going somewhere else would be hard, or would be not the default. So that's kind of one point I would look at on that one. Hints. Let's look at hints on this. Nothing coming up. So maybe, yeah, I guess the UK census, I think, doesn't start that early. No newspapers in the UK there, I'm afraid. So probably nothing else that I can do off directly on the subway map. What I would probably do here is then start to go into the catalog for Cheshire, England, and then we'd start to look at civil registration. And actually, that may not be too early, but maybe we could look at church records and see what we might find for Cheshire, England, and see what we can find out about Hannah. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. If you have any other questions, I would love to hear from you by email. Feel free to check out goldiemay.com and the Goldie May YouTube channel. And thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. It's fun for me to do this, and I hope this is really helpful to your research, helping you find anomalies, helping you find consistency in your research and opportunities to do more research. So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Richard.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and close.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you will join us for our next webinar, which is on July 27th with Larry Jensen. He will be giving a presentation entitled Understanding German Historical Background. This will be a pre-recorded lecture with no Q&A section. However, Larry Jensen's contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation. A recording of this webinar will be made available next week. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fhl_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.